department thought that this would be a great time of year to do a little demonstration about proper cookout tips to help everybody in East Longmeadow stay safe over this summer. Just some fun facts to start you off. U.S. beef sales are highest during the week of July 4th, when sales are expected to top $400 million. That's 25% higher than any other week of the year. So what a great time to get outside and do some cooking. Okay, so we're here with Don Mackey, the LCAT director, and he's very nicely set us up some coals to start doing our barbecuing. But while we're waiting for the coals to get hot enough, we're going to go ahead and talk about some transportation safety tips when you're on your way to an outdoor park, a friend's house, or even in your own backyard. So when transporting your food to any outdoor cooking event, it's really important to keep raw, potentially hazardous foods, so that's meats, separate from your ready-to-eat foods. So that's things like lettuce and tomatoes. Lettuce and tomatoes you can just take out and keep them separate from those raw meats. The raw meats, you want to make sure you're transporting in a way that keeps them at 41 degrees or lower. That's a really important temperature. Meats start to grow bacteria and become unsafe when they pass that 41 degree mark. So you want to transport them in a cooler with ice. And the important thing, and why we have to keep our potentially hazardous foods, so our meats, separate from our ready-to-eat foods, is because cooking temperatures have been established for these meats to kill off the bacteria. So chicken is something that needs to be cooked to 165 degrees. If the juices from the chicken were to get onto the tomato or the lettuce, that's something that we don't cook. So any of the potential salmonella that is on the chicken has now transferred onto an object that we're not going to cook. So that will not have a chance to have the kill step. The kill step in food safety is what we refer to as the stage in which any potential bacteria is eliminated. So today what we have to cook for you are some ground beef burgers as well as some chicken breast. Oftentimes when we're cooking out, we are using plates or cutting boards to start seasoning our meats or prepping our burgers. Best practice would be to leave those potentially hazardous foods in the package as long as possible. That's the way there's less chance of cross-contaminating with other products. If we put the raw meat product onto the plate and then we use that plate to put on the cooked product, or an example of a cutting board, and then we use that to cut up our vegetables, we have an opportunity to make ourselves really sick. So by leaving them in this paper, we're avoiding that cross-contamination altogether and leaving our limited availability of plates and or cutting boards for the items that are cooked and are ready to be prepped.
Now the other thing about that, Amy, is that also it limits the amount of handling that you do actually with your hands, and the possibility of transferring that contamination from your hands onto the uncooked food, which raises a question for me. So I set up the grill.
Right.
We're out here at Pine Knoll. There isn't running water. I can't run and wash my hands at the kitchen sink.
Right.
So how concerned do we need to be about making sure that we can keep our hands clean when we're kind of out in the woods doing the rustic thing?
Right. So I brought and set up, we have Purell hand sanitizer. I always, when I do an outdoor cooking event, I always travel with this. It's not an approved method for any permitted temporary event. It's only for the events you're serving with your house. If it is a permanent event, you do need a hand washing station set up, and I'm happy to review that with anyone who needs it. But for your home and something a little more casual, Purell and a paper napkin is a great way to disinfect your hands. So you would put that on. The key to using Purell, and when you actually when the bacteria is actually taken care of, is when it dries. So you're going to do that, and once you feel that it's dried, that's the kill step. Okay. So a lot of people will put a bunch on, and then it kind of just sits there and they move on. Once it dries, it's when it's actually done the job that it's supposed to do.
All right.
Okay.
Great.
And I recommend doing that after any time that you've touched a potentially hazardous food. So anything that may be bringing bacteria onto your food. So if you've touched the raw meat, or if you've done something like Don did earlier about cleaning off the grill, there was a lot of oil in there from the last person who've used it. So anytime you do an example like that, you want to make sure you're cleaning your hands. Today for our burgers, I brought a whole tomato. Now the reason that it was brought whole was because once tomatoes are cut, they become a potentially hazardous food. This is something that a lot of people don't realize, that tomatoes and melons once you cut through the skin, it brings potential bacteria into the flesh where it starts to grow. So by bringing and transporting your tomatoes whole, you're avoiding needing to keep them at 41 degrees just like your meats. So today we're going to cut this tomato here, and because we're going to use it within the hour, we don't have to worry about putting it back into a cooler and bringing it back down to 41 degrees. So now that we have our tomatoes covered, and it's a potentially hazardous food, but we're going to eat it within the hour so we don't have to keep it at 41 degrees, we're going to talk about a little bit about covering our food at picnics and outdoor events. A common problem that you'll have while you're eating outside is flies or fruit flies. And those might seem like innocuous pests that we have to deal with when we're eating outside, but really they have a potential to contaminate our food. One of the things that fruit flies and pests and flies like is rotting food, decaying matter. They go and they eat on that, and then they carry those germs with them to the food you're eating. So they're landing on those potentially dirty environments. Then they come and they land on your fresh food to eat that, and their feet are sitting right on whatever you're eating. So another important step is once you start preparing your food and it's at the stage where it's going to be eating, is to have something. It could be a cover to one of the other events that you brought, or even as simple as a overturned plate. It's not going to seal it, but at least deters the flies from accessing it.
All right, so Amy, we're ready to go here. You got the chicken. We're going to start with the chicken.
All right. So when putting the chicken on the grill, especially since we don't have a hand washing sink on, it's important to try to utilize the paper that we have to protect our hands.
Okay. So I'm just going to take this like this.
Yep.
And basically
flip it right over.
Flip it on there.
Then crumple that up in itself.
Now I'm going to, again, avoid getting the goop on my fingers.
Yep. And again, if you were to get goop on your fingers, we have the sanitizer that we can use to help do that. Help clean that.
Now the chicken we're putting on first because?
Chicken, it has the highest kill point. We talked earlier about getting to a point where the bacteria on the item is killed. And since what we worry about with chicken is salmonella, salmonella's kill point is 165 degrees. So this chicken will sit here until it has reached 165 degrees. Once we flip the chicken, we'll add the burgers, which have a lower temperature cook. But while it's cooking, what we can do is properly calibrate our thermometer to make sure it's telling us the right temperature.
All right, so Amy, you've got a bottle of water and a thermometer?
Yep.
All right, so the thermometer is the way we're going to check, obviously, the internal temperature of the meat.
Right. So if it's a non-digital thermometer, which they commonly are, and also the cheapest, what you want to make sure you do each time before you use one of these is calibrate it. And to calibrate it, all you need is water and ice. So I knew we wouldn't have ice today. Today's barbecue, so I have frozen a bottle of water. Ice is always at 32 degrees, which is why we use it to calibrate. So you would have your water, your ice cubes. You'd let the water sit in enough time to bring the temperature down to the temperature of the ice cubes. You'd put your thermometer inside. And actually what a lot of people don't realize is that little piece of plastic on your thermometer that you can slide down is actually like a wrench. It's used to fit around the nut at the bottom of your thermometer, and you use that to torque it up or down based on if it's over calibration or under calibration. So we wait for the needle to stop moving entirely before we try to calibrate it. So right now the needle is moving. We have our frozen water at 32, and the temperature on the thermometer says 40 degrees. So that means I need to lower the temperature of the thermometer by 8 degrees. So I do that by turning the dial on my thermometer until we hit 32 degrees.
That's very cool. Now, for the old-fashioned regular meat thermometer that you stick in a roast, is there a way to calibrate one of those? You just calibrate it by making sure it's at 32 against an ice cube and that it reads correctly.
Well, not against an ice cube. It won't calibrate against an ice cube.
Or in ice water.
Yeah,
in
okay.
ice water.
Sorry.
No, that's okay.
Yeah.
But so that's how you would do it.
Correct.
Now, if it's inaccurate,
right.
There's no.
A digital kind, you mean?
No, non-digital, the old analog.
This is that.
But does my old kitchen meat thermometer from 1974
has a nut at the bottom that you can, if you've lost this piece, which is common.
Since 1974? Yeah.
Yeah, but you can get a wrench. A small needle nose pliers will also
I did not know that.
to also turn that little nut. So you can put it in your ice water the same, grab some needle nose pliers, and you can hold that while you turn the face.
So you learn something new every day.
I mean,
That's
they
awesome.
should. I mean, I haven't seen one that doesn't calibrate.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So I never knew that. All right, so I guess I'm gonna turn this chicken, and Amy, you've got the burgers there.
No.
So say what I do wrong. Go ahead. No.
No, that's fine. All right. So what Don just did is he was trying to move the burger with the only clean spatula that we have. So now when we go to move any of the other food, we're gonna have raw hamburger on the outside of it. So what we can do is this particular spatula, we can turn upside down and still have a clean surface to work with where we're not contaminating anything. So we'll use this side from now on.
All right. Scolded.
Sorry.
I'm thinking this chicken is close. It probably's got a couple more minutes, but I don't want to overdo it. So now, what am I going to do here?
All right. So a common mistake that's often made even in restaurants when I go is people temp the items on the grill. Right? So if I temp the item on the grill and I get a little too deep, I'm going to get a temperature that's way higher than the actual flesh of the meat. The second mistake that's commonly made is that, I don't know if you can zoom in here, but that one end of the chicken is much thicker than the other. So if I go to temp the thin end, I'm going to get a really high temp because that's probably fully cooked through. But then when I go to the thicker end, that's going to take a lot longer. So you always want to test the temp at the thickest part of the meat. And what you want to do is insert your thermometer halfway through at the thickest point at about a 45-degree angle. We're there. So the temperature that we're looking for is 165. The temperature will continue to rise a little bit. So because this is the thickest piece of meat, we're good to go.
All righty. Awesome.
We'll temp that one just in case it was on a less hot part of the grill.
We're there. 165, like on the nose. All righty. We're gonna just check these burgers. I can see there's a little bit of red juice coming here, so these are still obviously red inside. I like a rare hamburger. What's the safe temperature for hamburger, and why is it higher for hamburger than for a steak? Beef is beef.
Right. So the food code says for ground beef it's 155. USDA recommends 160. The reason why 155 is the kill point is because with ground beef we're worried about E. coli. And E. coli is killed at 155 degrees. A lot of people like rare hamburgers, so when they eat those rare hamburgers they're running the risk of the inside of the meat not getting to the kill point. Now the reason why ground beef has a higher kill temperature is because during the processing you're mixing all of the ground beef together, right? A whole muscle of meat, you're going to get the only exposed part to that manufacturing process is if the inside is 145 or even a little less, you're still going to get that high kill point on the outside, which is where you worry about E. coli. But since ground beef is processed, all of the portion of that ground beef has been processed and exposed to the E. coli contaminant.
So that's something I obviously never knew or gave much thought to. Because again, for people who like, their beef cooked rare, sometimes it's an issue, a concern for safety, and is it cooked enough to be safe?
But if you have a weakened immune system, so if you're cooking and feeding a child a burger, the recommendation is 170 degrees for any child or someone with a weakened immune system. So if you have someone with compromised immunity or elderly who sometimes has a hard time fighting things, you definitely want to get their burger to the 155, 160 degrees. But someone who's really healthy like Don here, they're probably, if it's E. coli, it's going to get him anyways, but anything else that we worry about, he's going to be okay.
Now, the other thing we talked about a little bit earlier was the source of the meat, the source of your ground beef, right? And I had asked Amy before we started, is there a difference between buying a package of frozen burgers at, say, a discount store and going to Whole Foods or getting some sort of organic grass-fed beef is one necessarily safer than the other?
Right.
And your explanation was?
Well, it's the manufacturing process is what's going to contaminate that. You can have beef that has inherent issues, but really what we're worried about and why we're cooking to this temperature is the E. coli. And so that happens during the manufacturing process. So that could be your grass-fed, no hormones, no GMO, Whole Foods beef, or that could be your bargain beef. It's really about where they're getting their meat slaughtered.
And it's conceivable that one slaughterhouse could be processing both of those sources of beef.
Right.
So, something to keep in mind.
All right, let's temp it. I think we're gonna be fine here. Yeah, we're definitely, I can tell by the texture. Yeah.
159. All right. Let's eat.
Another common issue that you have when you're eating out or at a cookout or something is you kind of make for what you think people are going to eat, and then there's always a little extra.
Yep.
If you're like me, I come from an Italian family, there's always extra food sitting around. So one of the problems with that, besides the fly issue that we talked about earlier, is that when food sits in the temperature danger zone, which is anything above 70 and below 120, it starts to grow bacteria rapidly. And when that bacteria grows, it's hard to then kill it because it's so warm. If it's greater than 90 degrees out, they recommend that you don't let food sit out untemperature controlled for more than 1 hour. Anything under 90 degrees, you have a 2-hour window. And the reason for that is just the multiplication of that bacteria happens faster. Now, one thing you can do if you want to reheat your food once, so you're kind of getting close to that 2-hour window, people are going to start eating again, or someone comes up and says, you know, how long have those burgers been out? And you know it's less than 2 hours. You can put your food back on the grill and reheat it to 165 degrees for 15 seconds. And that's known to kill any of the bacteria that has been able to grow in that time frame. So, thank you for watching this little segment on cookout safety. Just a quick tip recap before we sign off. Remember, keep hot food hot and cold food cold. That will help prevent the bacteria growth from forming in the food that you're eating. When in doubt, throw it out. If it's been sitting out or something doesn't seem right, toss it and start over. If you need to reheat food that's been sitting out, make sure you bring it up to 165 degrees for 15 seconds or more. Remember, keep some sanitizer handy. Anytime your hands may become contaminated after you use the bathroom, make sure you're sanitizing and getting the bacteria off. Separate your foods in transportation and before you cook your potentially hazardous food. Make sure you have the ready-to-eat stuff like tomatoes and lettuce separate from your raw beef. Finally is use a thermometer. It's a lot easier to guessing whether you think the food is cooked enough or not. Is it too pink? Is it pink enough? This will take all the guesswork out of it for you. So if you have any questions, you can reach me directly at the health department, 413-525-5400, extension 1105. Thank you.